Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I am joined by Greg McLaughlin, host of the Rebel Base Card podcast, to discuss the 8th episode from Skeleton Crew titled The Real Good Guys. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost conversations. Hey, everybody. It is time for a Skeleton Crew finale, conversation. Of course, we have Greg McLaughlin, host of the Rebel Base Card, joining us for this episode, concluding out our wonderful run of Skeleton Crew episodes, which now that the series technically perhaps is officially over, I hope that you, first off, have enjoyed our conversations thus far. And if you've missed any, just go back into the podcast feed, the queue, if you will, and go check out those fun episodes. We've had many great guests, some new guests to the Force Ghost Conversations show, and we're continuing to expand the proverbial seats around the campfire that is this podcast. So it's been a lot of fun. I hope that you've enjoyed every step along the way, because I have, and I like giving you guys a great product to listen to week in and week out. So this is the segment of the show before we get into the main topic, which would be the news, Cloud City gossip discussion. But frankly, there isn't a whole lot. Again, still really reeling from the break of the holidays and Skeleton Crew of it all. I imagine now the Skeleton Crew is concluded, we'll start getting some more ramp up of news. Perhaps Andor Season 2 may get some information. Visions Volume 3 could get some more information. And who knows what's potentially down the pipeline here. So all that to be looking out for as we head forward here. And really the big news item is Skeleton Crew has concluded with its eighth and final episode titled The Real Good Guys. And of course, this is a spoiler conversation with Greg. So if you haven't watched the episode, you haven't watched the series yet, you may want to go watch it on Disney Plus first before coming back to this moment in time. You've kind of been forewarned about it. Like it's not on me at this point. You know what you're getting into. So yeah, that is pretty much it for the news this week. Let's get into that main topic discussion here. I don't want to leave you guys hanging because it's a really good one, and I hope you've enjoyed the Skeleton Crew and will continue to enjoy the Skeleton Crew and the fun conversations as we continue on in the weeks beyond. So thanks again, folks. May the Force be with you. Take care. All right, folks, it is time to get into our final discussion of, well, for now, perhaps, who knows? Maybe it's the final. Maybe it's not. We'll get into it. But it is, for now at least, the conclusion of Skeleton Crew, Season 1's finale. Maybe it's the end of it. Maybe it's not. Who knows? But we, of course, are Force Ghost Conversations, and we are here to chat about all things Skeleton Crew. And by that, we have a discussion, we have a conversation, and we have a guest. We have a wonderful guest, returning guest many times. I mean, basically a returning champ at this point for Force Ghost Conversations. We got from the Rebel Base Card podcast, the host, Greg McLaughlin's back on the show. Greg, how are you doing, my friend? And welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's fun to be back on. I mean, if Colby gets Ross, I'd say, for the Colby cast, I'd say Anthony gets me. I'm like, it's only fair. We're sharing, hosts and co-hosts around.
That's right.
But it's fun to be back. It's fun to talk about this particular show. And, sometimes you feel like a little naughty. I'm like, we haven't cut our show yet. So I'm like, do I save stuff?
Yes.
Do I hold it back? Do I go through? But it'll all come out in the wash, just because I think, and you'd agree, there's a lot to talk about this episode and the series in general.
I think so too, and I think to your benefit too, being a repeat customer. At least with Skeleton Crew, these questions are a lot tamer than when you were last on with the Acolyte and the heavy hitter home run questions that I threw at everybody. Those 99-mile-an-hour fastballs were coming in pretty hard. These are a bit more straightforward, a little bit, I think, a little bit more speculating, perhaps a bit more fun and joyful nature with the kid nature of it all.
And I think it's also amazing that you pre-send the questions. And
Yes.
I have to look at them going, Greg and I have no idea. We don't share anything beforehand, but that's part of the shtick of the show. In this case, it's nice because you can kind of sit there and kind of look at them,
Yeah.
and then you can kind of chew on them a little bit
Can marinate a
and
bit.
kind of
Absolutely.
exactly, exactly. And by the way, I don't know whether this podcast, do you validate parking or do you have a I feel like maybe if you want the 80s, like, like the membership cards, I mean, is there a punch that I get for how many episodes and I get like a free rental? I mean,
Yeah, on your 10th one, you get a free ad
that's
in the
perfect. It's perfect.
show. We'll make it work somehow. Um, Great. Speaking of those pre-written questions for this show, let's get into that first one here. So now that Skeleton Clue has, I should put quotes around this, quote unquote, concluded, maybe not.
Hmm.
Has the show given you the itch, so to speak, to watch some of the films from the 80s that it was inspired by? Now, if listeners are, we hopefully have a lot of cross, listenership by this point. People listen to Rebel Base Card, people listen to Force Ghost Conversations, and when you had kindly had me on to kind of do like a Skeleton Crew prep show, we did a lot of discussion about how you haven't seen a lot of these like 80s Amblin adventure films, E.T., Goonies, etc. You had grown beyond them by that point in the 80s, and you were on to other things at that time. Has this, back to the question here, has this given you the itch to like revisit those and be like with fresh eyes, different perspective? What do you think?
Well, I would say one thing is that the universe decided that I should see some of these. And I will preface this by saying, like, when you look at the list of Amblin movies, and that includes things like, Back to the Future,
Sure.
Jurassic Park, there are a bunch of movies going in there. But then, I would say some of the core ones that tie into this would be like the E.T. and
Yeah.
the Goonies, and I would say Explorers if you threw them in there. Haven't seen that one either. Um, but also things like Gremlins. And some of this, like I
Oh,
said, it
definitely.
depended
Yeah.
upon when you were born as far as, where you were. And especially when you're a teen in your headspace, it's like, are you more interested in watching stuff that looked like it was for kids or stuff looks like for adults? And so I was really, spoiled at that point on a bunch of really amazing franchises. And it just wasn't something that really appealed to me.
Hmm.
But like I said, the universe decided that I needed to watch a couple. So for Christmas, I got DVD or Blu-rays
Love it.
of both E.T. and the Goonies.
Oh, that's awesome.
Someone decided it's like, yes, it is time. Um, but what I would say, I would say that Goonies would be my first go-to. I
Mhm.
don't, anybody who's listened to me talk about ET knows, I had a thing for it when I was 11. I wasn't really that interested. And it was one of the few things for many, many years I agreed with my 11-year-old self going, nope, it just wasn't
Mhm.
something a cutesy alien. I mean, I think we can all agree on Mac and Me, so like if we found that as common ground going Mac and Me is a really horrible movie, something along those lines. And I would say ET, obviously Spielberg, much better. Um, but I would say that Goonies, after seeing Skeleton Crew, is something I'm very interested to seeing because now I can go back and go, oh, I didn't have to see all those cues because it was nice, with all the podcasts and everybody along going, hey, they got that from there, they got that
Uh-huh.
from there, got that from there. So I'm like, I kind of know what I'm looking for. And of course, some of the characters, some of the actors who are in Goonies. I'm excited to see that, and I'll,
Yeah.
I'll be looking for probably my spirit animal Chunk, I guess is
Yes.
the one
Yep.
character. So I'm like, yeah, the husky one. That probably it will appeal to me. But at any rate, I will be interested in seeing Goonies, and then to kind of see where we're at, and then you kind of go, oh. And that should add even a more nice development with Skeleton Crew. I know what they were trying to go for. I just hadn't seen the exact, frame by frame reference
Yeah.
material.
Well, I hope you do some type of like episode on the Rebel Base Card afterwards, just like rehashing your thoughts after you watch both of those films to be like, this is, a quick episode, 20 minutes to being like, I really like this or I didn't like this. This didn't hit for me, but I see the Skeleton Crew references. I think that would be a fun bookend to how this all plays out here.
We'll have to bring everybody on. It's like,
Yeah, I think it's
I'll
just an
have to wait.
adventure. You may want to watch it with you. Like it should just be a watch along.
Exactly. I think, once the Oscar season's done and, Jen and Greg and Antonio and PT are done with the long
Well,
take, I'm like,
once
I may borrow
poor
some of them.
once poor Craig Cass is released from the Oscars.
I'm not the one, Anthony, who had him on for 2 hours, so I don't feel too bad. Like, you have a little bit of blood on your hands, but
Oh, I'll
that's,
tell you what, we just got started. We've just gotten through one question here. You're 6 minutes in this. We've just begun.
we've
We
just begun.
we
That's
2 hours
funny.
will fly by like that before you even know
Mhm.
it. Wow, and of course, it's not a you don't bring Greg McLaughlin on the show without some reference to some obscure 80s property or movie, right? So Mac and me getting it. It's the Hudson Hawk of this episode. we're get,
Aw,
we're getting
th
into it now.
are you saying you want a Hudson Hawk watch party? I can cue that thing up in a heartbeat, pal.
Oh, absolutely. Let's get the hawk rolling. Get the hawk rolling. Have some scorpions playing on the background. It'll be a delight of a night. Get some order in
Hashtag
some
catch
Papa
the hawk,
John's.
man.
Yeah, we'll have a fun night. Whew, we're up to a good start here, folks. Um,
I swear
so
we're talking about Skeleton Crew.
we're eventually going to get into this episode. We got a lot to chew on here, but there's when the hawk is brought up, you got to dive in on
Mhm.
that first. It takes precedent over the crew.
Respect the hawk.
Respect the hawk, that's for sure. So now that the show is kind of concluded, I want to talk about how you got to this point, knowing that you were kind of excited about the show as it got closer to it, from our discussions beforehand, but you wanted to you weren't like if they put it on a list like when they announced the full schedule slate of here are Star Wars properties coming to Disney Plus. You admitted that you wouldn't circle that and be like, this is the thing I'm most looking forward to out of
Right.
everything on this lineup here. So then you challenge yourself to be a writer for Fantha Tracks, to kind of think outside the box and look at this from different perspectives, which I think was a wonderful thing. So as we approach this finale here, how did you feel about the show overall as we got to this point here? So what do you how I guess in a different sense, how are you? What did you think about the show as we hit play Tuesday night, on that final episode?
I can't say I wasn't nervous. Now, I they have hit it all the way through the season, and I think
Hmm.
it was a great series of television that I think it was one of the first Star Wars series that I wasn't necessarily saying, like, how much time is left. Of
Yeah.
course, we could sit there for hours and we everybody rewatches stuff left and right, but I felt the pacing was good. I thought the story was good. I thought they were doing what they needed to do if they were trying to channel that Amblin 80s,
Hmm.
kids adventure thing. But seeing as how so many series often will kind of stumble at the finish line, even
Mm.
on beloved series, you're wondering, like, okay, there's a lot of things happening. How are they going to stick the landing? Will they stick the landing?
Right.
And so in some cases, I would say I went in with more guarded expectations of like, look, I don't expect, like, there was nothing that I seen so far that said they're going to do a lot of exposition and do this. They're just going to,
Right.
it's probably going to take, it's going to follow the letters. It's going to finish. There's a little bit of here and there. And then, like, I think even after last episode of the Breakfast Pack, Greg and I kind of talked about what mysteries do you think are just going to be left on the table? They
Hmm.
can't answer everything, and I think that we now have come to expect the fact that some of this stuff just isn't going to be talked about.
Yeah.
It's going to be mystery in the ether, and then for fodder for us to talk about, for the days, weeks, and months and years ahead. So I would say I was a little guarded, but I figured that they would probably pull it off, and that I would say, like, look, just enjoy the ride. It was kind of interesting as we kind of got into it, where there was even a little bit of the way in before it kind of you started clicking, going, "Oh, I see what's going to happen," it was a weird feeling, and I don't know whether it was a good or bad thing, but I was like, oh, okay, I see how
Hmm.
this is going to go down,
Hmm.
based on everything we kind of knew, but overall, still just very happy about it.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that the show kind of was hitting on those cylinders for you, and especially not admittedly being a super big fan of those projects that were inspired by it, that you were able to even find great joy in the show aside from all those references. You were even saying that people in your household were enjoying it that really don't have any connection to Star Wars whatsoever. So I think it's interesting that this could be a good in a way, starting point for a lot of people, an entryway for people perhaps into the franchise, a way to get people into this that are like, okay, that's a good show. Maybe there's something else in the Star Wars buffet that I'd be interested in. I'll have a little bit of Bad Batch over here, maybe add a sprinkle of Mandalorian. We'll see what happens.
I think that Jude Law brings that to the table, and
It's the Jude
I
Law effect.
it's the Jude Law effect where, like I said, my mother, who will be turning 83 real soon, was a fan of Jude Law. He was a
Yeah.
known quantity, and you could see it throughout the series. I'm like, he brings the goods. I mean, like, whatever truck Disney, rolled up to the back of his house and dumped, please do it again. Just like the credits that were coming out of the onyx cinder at the end. That's
Oh.
what y'all need to do again, because he could carry it. And so whatever you were going to have him do, he did it. And so he has the ability, just kind of like, the humanoid Grogu, of going, oh wow, he's a known quantity, and I'm just going to enjoy it. And my mother did. And like, even afterwards, she was like, is he going to turn up again somewhere? And we're like, shrug, don't know. But I like the way it ended, where, he certainly didn't sacrifice himself. So I'm like,
Hmm.
it goes beyond, we didn't see him die. Most likely he's
He's probably in
New
prison.
Republic,
Yeah,
in
jail or
prison,
something
but
like that. But
he ain't gonna
we've
last there that long.
I was gonna say we've seen with Moff Gideon that these prison cells aren't really that strong.
Nope. So, I mean,
Speaking of, yeah.
no, I was just
No,
gonna
go ahead.
say, yeah, there wasn't necessarily a, cliffhanger per se, but there was enough there, I think, tactfully done, that you go, okay, you have some work to do, but you have some room to grow, as it were.
Absolutely. Wow, what a great segue there, because you're talking about that kind of quote unquote cliffhanger at the end. But this episode started with a cliffhanger.
Mhm.
Which Jod basically turned on that lightsaber and it cut to black. And I think a lot of us were speculating, like, holy cow, is Jod going to go full Anakin on everybody here? Are we going to witness the bloodbath to start this episode? I hope not, because it's a bunch of kids here. But Star Wars has proven that it is possible to do something like that, circa episode 3. So Jod does not threaten the parents in a way that many like me surmised. And instead presents himself as this Republic emissary and a Jedi. So, do you feel like the ending of last week's episode into this week's episode was kind of a bait and switch, so to speak?
That's a tough question, and I keep looking at this one. I can see it both ways. I like the lightsaber as a prop, because
Yeah,
it does sort of like, oh, if you hadn't noticed this thing that looks like a lightsaber next to me, maybe you haven't seen one for a while. Let me just show
sure.
you how this works. But in the presentation, it was a great, in which way you could say it was a great kind of bait and switch, because
Hmm.
they had no idea, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, boom, let me introduce myself,
Yeah,
John Wood. And who wasn't interested in, oh, okay, maybe that is your name, or at least the most common name you use.
sure.
But I would say also with the, in a what a the episode where he found the lightsaber, at the end he ignites it, but
Another
it's
one
off,
too. Yep.
another one, and everybody the next episode was like, how come he didn't use the lightsaber? A lot of people missed the fact that that they took it off of him.
Yeah.
But I would say they felt very subtle, like little subtle ones, where I don't feel that it was like, "Oh my gosh, you did it this way." I think it was just a nice little at the end, blah, and you're like, "Oh my gosh."
Hmm.
And let's just say it was so nice not to have these all dropped at once, because I think if you were binging this series, like some people will do, and it's fine,
Hmm.
then I think not having, that being, "Oh my gosh, I gotta wait a week for this," so it was kind of fun, but I didn't feel like he was misrepresented, as it were.
Yeah, I think that's right. I feel like I was bracing myself for like the biggest opening sequence of this, like the kids being like, we're gonna charge them and do something, like showcasing their true courage and bravery that they've learned over the course of these 8 episodes here. And then for him just to be like, oh, I am a Republic emissary, I'm Jordan Wood, I am here to do this due process that is required here of this exchange of money. I was just like, oh, okay, that's it. So like I had built up all this inner tension within myself over the last week to be like, I hope these kids are going to be okay, and then for it just to be like, I feel like I like like I need to just pause the episode, just sit now with this relaxation that I've just come upon myself here. So in a way, I did feel a little bit like, okay, they built it up for all that, and then just to deflate me like that. But I'm glad I got deflated in a way too. So like at the end of the day, I think it worked out pretty well.
Well, and especially I think going into that last episode, I felt that anything could happen, and I liked that. I
Yeah,
didn't like the
yeah.
fact that you know, oh, I saw that coming a mile away. I was, we talked to like this could go 2 or 3 different ways, and it was to me, which said I think it was assembled right, and I think it was written really well and assembled right,
Hmm.
and just those little nods where it was like there was a little bit, and there was a little bit of a cliffhanger, but not like oh good lord, or if you're trying to like be confused, like anything, watching a few episodes of Lost, if you missed something, then you felt really lost. It wasn't just a clever name for a TV show. So
Hmm.
it was nice. I liked how they did it.
Yeah, it was a clever name for a TV show. I'll tell you that. Um, I think that the jot of it all was really interesting because especially as that ended, like we got to see it from like the perspective of the children's, like we got to see the children's faces on the other side. Like that was kind of that big thing where it we could see like the fear in their eyes as he ignited that blade basically, or at least maybe I'm Mandela affecting it that I remember seeing their faces or I'm projecting myself on that. I'm pretty sure that we saw their faces there as it concluded. But it does make sense that he's like trying to project himself as a Jedi, as like this. He's like, okay, these people probably haven't seen one in a while, so the only way that they know what a Jedi is if I show that I have a lightsaber and ignite it and know what I'm doing here. So it's interesting that he has this longer game at play already from the start of like, basically, I'm going to enslave these people and have them keep making money for me so that I can just basically take jump in a pool of money, endless money. So
But I like the fact that it wasn't necessarily such a soft redemption. I think
no,
one
yeah,
way you
no,
could have
no,
totally wrote it was is that he was kind of done, tired, and he kind of bonds with these kids and helps them out. That could have been just fine. But
very easily the case. Yeah,
I like the fact that he was a very flawed person, and that little backstory came in at the perfect
yeah,
time, said just enough, but really gave you an idea. It didn't justify the things he did, but
nope,
it
not at
gives you
all.
an idea of where he was coming from. And I thought that was consistent to that character.
Mm,
But even at the end, he was still holding back. There were some cards there that you weren't like. He clearly, he had the gun. He dropped the gun,
yeah,
and then somebody, and this will come up in a show. I was like, Wim calls out to him at the end, right before they leave, and that was fascinating.
yeah.
I think I could sit there and ask, why did Wim call back after him? What
That's
did
a
he
fair
expect
question back.
to?
Yeah,
But then also as Jod is staring at the large ship as it's crashing, and just sort of he's trying to figure out what his next move is,
mm.
and I like that. I really like that this character still has some things held to the vest, and like I said, Disney, get that truck ready. I
Keep it
want some
going.
of these
Yeah.
credits rolling up. I hope you have something left in the tank, because I think there's more you could say about him, or more you could do with them and him, even though this is an ending. I think there's stuff left, and I'm like, give me some more Jude Law in Star Wars. Please don't tell me this was the last we'll see of Jude Law.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point that you make there. And as you said it, I kind of just got like the picture in my head of like the character arc of a season one, season two crosshair from the Bad Batch in a way,
Mhm.
where he's like, I am so in on this reality that I've created for myself. I have to see it through until there's like this event that's like makes them realize, okay, this doesn't have to be it the way. And maybe the skeleton crew could eventually be that catalyst by which to poke at it if we're
Sure.
introduced to more of this over the future. And then he's embraced in a different way. Because it seems like it's that I just, in a way, I'm seeing the same ending sequence of Bad Batch season one, where they leave Crosshair on Camino, and they go away. But they're still like, you can come if you want, basically. But he says, no, I'm staying behind, and then they go away. Um, so it seems like the door is kind of open if he's open to it, which I think is an important aspect of Star Wars overall. Like redemption is always a central theme to it, and if the person wants it, there's an opportunity and a way for it, but they have to want it. And Jod at this point is not at that point where he wants it, but it did feel like there was a part of him that was held back. Like he could have, if
Hmm.
he really wanted to, use that lightsaber, just cut people up and cut off some hands and limbs and
He
really
said it.
devastate people, or use that blaster to shoot people with like deadly accuracy. Like if he wanted to with the Force, I feel like he really could have done a number on Wendell. Wendell, that Wim's dad, right?
Yes,
Really tore his hand up in a way. I get kids show too, but also like so there's some practical ways that he could have messed with bone structure a bit more, I guess. Um, but yeah, it seemed like he might have had one hand tied behind his back in terms of it actually trying to fulfill the mission that he's tried to set for himself here.
he was trying not to. He was, you could see almost an argument with himself. Like
Yeah,
he
there was a
was
conflict in a way.
there was conflict within him. On the one hand, you see it in the previous episode where he's offing Brutus,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
still like,
Exactly. No hesitation.
no hesitation there. But you can make the argument that Brutus had basically said, "I'm going to kill you either way,"
Kill or be
and
killed in that moment.
he'd already thrown him an airlock. So I'm like, okay, it was a little callous, but as much as he talked, as much as he threatened the kids and the parents and everybody within range of that lightsaber, he couldn't bring himself to do it. And I think also it's so fascinating that Snowball
Hmm.
was spared his wrath in the previous episode. I'm like, that was not a mistake. I think that let the audience know that there's something good in him, and there's so good in him, and it would be fun to see. Like I said, it ties into Wimhet did not. There was nothing that the story needed to have
Yeah.
Wim go back and say Jod and yell Jod's name as if to say something else. Wim was crying. He was like, "You're lying." He was very hurt by him, but I think
Mm.
he still had this relationship or this attachment to him.
Yeah.
And I think that
Oh,
it
yeah.
would be fascinating to see, you know, do you can I think with this one you can only get this kind of story once. If you go back to it's Back to the Future 3 or Matrix 3,
Hmm.
which I would say most of the audience would probably be a lot more sympathetic to Back to the Future 2 and 3 than they would be Matrix 2 and 3, which I'll go on strongest recommendation. There's no need to watch either of them. Matrix is a
Oh.
single movie. If you're
Oh.
fine with it, it's they put a lot into it. I liked when they built the entire highway for the Matrix one or whatever, the Matrix whatever. But I'm like, sometimes you get lucky with Blade Runner 2049.
Hmm.
Sometimes you don't get so lucky with those. But that's neither here nor there. I haven't seen most of those since they came out in the theater. But and I think I bought them on DVD actually.
Time for a
But
rewatch after you're done with Goonies and ET.
I like the Matrix's anime. Remember they
Yeah, they
released an
did
anime
anime after the third one.
Reloaded, Matrix
Uh,
Reloaded or something.
after the Resurrection, Revelations is the third one, I think. Reload is the second one. Yeah, Revelations would be the third one. And yeah, they did that anime, and then they did a tie-in video game that's after that too. And then they had to abide by all that canon after for the fourth one that came out,
You would make a
Resurrection,
much
I think.
stronger
Yeah.
argument for me to watch Rebel Moon, and I would probably be like, yeah, I'll probably watch it. If you're saying
Hey,
like, I'll give you a choice, Greg. You can go rewatch a lot of the Matrix stuff, or you can watch this brand new one. I'd be like, you
hey,
know what,
Rebel Moon
Anthony?
Part One director's cut.
Yeah, there you go. And if it had audio commentary on the iTunes movie, I'd be like, all the better,
Oh, better.
all the better.
Love it.
Anyway,
Love it. Well, since we're on the Jod conversation here, I'm gonna jump a question here on the order of things, but I think it's pertinent to things. So, like, we kind of, at least I've put forth a bit here. It seems like Jod's ultimate goal is to basically kind of quote unquote enslave the people of Atten and keep them making more money for him. They keep the one he wants to keep the mints running and all that. Everyone will just keep living as they are. He'll be the new supervisor because also he took out the supervisor. We'll get to that question in a second here. Um, but the ultimate question here is like the why. What's he gonna gain from just an endless supply of money? is there any amount of money that would ever be able to satiate Jod's desire for cash?
I do like they leaned into the greed,
Hmm.
because it seemed true, and I think it's also maybe once they got there, that was just the plan. The first thing that came into his mind, it's like, keep things going. I'm in charge. This makes sense
Yeah.
because any sane person would have been, they were already loading up coins on the, Republic credits on the Onyx Cinder.
Hmm.
Um, that's what I thought. It was like, we can drain this if we have to use this place for a base. I think one thing he was trying to say, like, hey, this is more money than we can handle, but it's an infinite supply. Let's just keep this magic going. I can move myself back and forth,
Hmm.
but it's definitely not a good plan. But sometimes they don't all need to be perfect. They're all not Lex Luthors running around there having calculated every inch of how this was going to
Sure,
work.
they definitely didn't.
But I think it works with it because it is kind of shocking because I'm like, just leave with the money, dude.
Yeah, take the money
They
and run.
already have take the money and run. And I think I put that in my notes going very apropos for this particular
That's
podcast
right.
who likes the occasional classic rock.
Get the Steve Miller band running.
Mhm. But it doesn't make it didn't make any sense, but I kind of like that a little bit. The fact that it just, that was a doomed plan. And sometimes pirates are not the smartest people.
And his ultimate
Um,
downfall and a great weakness for his that could be exploited.
and then if I can kind of take a sidebar on this, um, thanks to an Instagram reel that had Stevenson in Black Sails. My
Mm,
wife and I have been watching
mm.
Black Sails. My
Look
wife
at
actually
that.
kind of didn't wait for me to finish. Like, she moved
Oh.
a season or so ahead. The beauty of Black Sails is that it runs around over and over to the point where you're like, just go get the gold already. And if anybody like, it's amazing how circular it is, where it's just like, there's plans within plans within plans within plans.
Mm,
So it's just one of those where I'm like, this is how a pirate thinks. They some of them are incredibly smart. Some of them are just like, dude, you're so stupid. And then, like, something coming new. So that's where I kind of like, okay,
yeah.
this doesn't work. But yeah, I think Ray Stevenson comes in like season 3. He's only in
Interesting.
there for like an episode or two, but I'm like,
Hey,
I'll binge the entire series on Netflix.
we love a Star
Um,
Wars cameo.
I just love a Star Wars cameo, and actually, it's not a bad series. It's very Game of Thronesy.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff a lot of stuff happening, not for kids. But yeah, as far as like the insight of a pirate, that you guys are taking way too much. You guys taking way too much time, too much effort to do this. You might as well just run the straight and narrow, because this pirating business is hard.
It's hard life. It's a hard life, and it's not a glamorous life. I mean, they glamorize it in popular media and stuff like that, but in the real day to day of it all, like it's not fun to be a pirate in many respects until you get that big reward, right? It's like
Hmm.
you spent 9 innings, you went 1 for 5, but you hit a home run with your one hit. It's like with those other 4 at bats, you struck out swinging. I mean, and then you spent the time in the field. Maybe you got one ground ball to you, and you didn't really do a whole lot the rest of the time. Like that's kind of what I imagine the pirate life being, a good analogy for it, at least. And Jod was very honest about, like, I was in the gutters, and a Jedi found me, and I was trained a little bit. That's why I can move some stuff here and there, but I'm not the best with it. And then I'm forced to watch this person that kind of took me in be murdered right in front of me, and then I'm left to scrum around as a street rat the rest of my life. Like I get the why for the gold and all that stuff, but I'm like, what are you gonna do with it? You gonna sell it off to people? You just gonna keep the barrier up and go out freely? Like, well, again, like you said, they didn't really have a fully fleshed plan here. I think he was making up as he went along. Clearly, he was like, "We gotta get through the barrier first. I gotta try and get my crew in through the barrier, like one thing at a time." And he's just kind of falling things into place. He was such an opportunist in this show. He found the right time to strike and to pull out that pirates code nonsense. You're like, "All right, we'll fight to the death. Just yield. I'll take it over here." And then telling a perfectly timed story to get all the people interested in going Dadatin instead of sending him out the airlock, and then taking out Brutus timely, and just all that stuff worked out in his favor.
Yeah, and some of it is just sort of like the dog that caught the car. It's like, now what?
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
whole life was going after the
You
big
got it.
score.
Yeah.
You got it. You got a bigger score than anything you can deal with, but that was almost it was almost too much.
Yeah.
One more vault than really needed to be. It should have been 11:38.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
they that was the bait. That was the real bait and switch. Anthony was 11:30, and everybody's like, "Oh, come on, you're
You
doing
just
that on
had to.
purpose."
Of course they
Now
did.
they're just trolling us with like numbers going
They knew what they were
11:30,
doing.
11:37. Oh, you guys suck. Anyway.
Yeah, it was like playing, they were spinning the wheel at The Price is Right, and they needed the 5-cent piece, and it's just right in between 10 and 15. Messing around with us there. Yeah, Jod is super fascinating, and like we'll get to this a little bit later in terms of like the show itself, but I'm interested to see what they could do with him because again, if it didn't happen on screen, I
Mhm.
I can't assume that it happened. But what I can assume that happened is that the supervisor turned out to be a droid, a la space. What is that? 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Hal.
Yep, you're basically you're Hal and Star Wars here, and instead of it being a person or Tack Rened or Wim's mom or someone else in the picture, um, it was a droid, a big droid at that too. Are you a fan of this choice, Greg? And are you kind of maybe perhaps disappointed that the supervisor wasn't a like bigger character or a bigger reveal, so to speak, as actually being a person rather than just being a droid?
Now, I would say that I was on the Rented train, Captain Rented train
I
for a
was too.
long
Yep.
time. I was on record. I was, and sometimes it was just right in front of me like, "No, that was probably the skeleton that was stabbed, and that's all there is." And they told you. They told you, "Great, you have nothing but yourself to
You have
blame on
yourself to
that.
blame. Yeah.
No one but yourself to blame." They put it right out there. Um, Someone needs to tell me at some point why SM33 Santa was on the airlock door, but I'll have to just have to take that one. But I would say Stephen Fry is a big get and fun to have him in the Star Wars universe. But it was interesting, and during the rewatch of this, I looked at that room. If the supervisor's a droid, ain't no need for chairs. So at
That's
some
right.
point, with all the extra cables, and it started to look like, like the Dalek Emperor at one point, where you've got this Dalek Emperor with all these like cables and stuff, where
Yeah.
must have been over time, it just became more and more automated, and there wasn't a need for it, and there might have been something. I mean, anybody who's watched, Star Trek the classics, TOS, saw this one coming. Like, yeah, it's probably a droid. Um, but I don't think I was disappointed. I liked how they did it, and especially when you see Jod, move his hand over what looks either a console or a chair, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of dust. There was the questions that I had was that, I love how he called him out. Like, well, you're either
Yeah, which one are you? Are you a Jedi, which we got this last message being your enemies and traitors to the Republic, or you're an
or
emissary? What are you doing here?
so clearly he knew, and that leads, I think, to some more questions as far as they must have gotten
Yeah,
word, but how did they get word? Because it's hard for communications to pierce the barrier. But then again, there might have been, we would assume that it would be an open communication. It might have been some of the last ships that appeared, and
yeah,
but it does seem like generations ago. But yeah, you're like, when did he know? How did he know? And when did he know? And
absolutely.
but it's fascinating that this particular supervisor, however long he's been in complete control, was pretty content, like John, to like, y'all can just keep doing what you're doing.
Hmm.
So it wasn't, whereas but it's also like, did the supervisor know that there was no longer a republic and now it was an empire?
Yeah,
All they knew is that the Jedi are traitors. So you can read
which
into
would have
that.
come from the Empire at that point, basically, because that would have been the same speech that Palpatine was giving.
And then it goes like, how did the empire not know that AT-AT existed?
And that's a
Did
bigger question, I
someone
would say. Yeah,
did
who's who?
someone shut it down? Or,
Why is this not funding the creation of the Death Star?
is this something that Obi-Wan also did while he was in the Jedi Temple, while he was there telling people to stay away? Did he hide the location of it?
Oh my
Because
gosh, yes.
so let me be the first to throw that one on. I still have a little bit of tinfoil left in
It
the
was
kit here.
DaCosta News' last thing in the Temple Archives was erasing a planet.
Save the mint for no good reason. I don't know. And were the other planets around? Um, yeah, you love these stories, but anybody who's seen anything, any other Star Wars knows there that Malachor or
Mhm.
anything happening to Jeddah. There are stuff that they just you'll probably never know.
That's true.
But that's fun, and that's fun, and that let someone else pick up these crumbs and do some more things with it. Because as we know we're getting acolyte, you know, extra
Books
material,
and stuff,
books
yeah.
and things like that. This would be so much fun. I mean, this is just screaming young adult books and
Yeah,
comics
I would say
and
comics
little stories.
especially, yeah.
Exactly, and I think that just like with the old Marvel, Star Wars comics, or even the newer ones where you can run a long time on a very little story, this is a perfect setup. Um, so have at it, but, maybe
Mhm.
maybe they're just gonna hold back, or maybe we find out some other stuff. Maybe we find out it would be great to do a comic story on Captain Rennet. There
I
we go.
agree,
Let's
I
let's
agree.
do it. That would be fun. Some adventures with Captain Rennet and SM-33. Let's get some more SM-33 stuff in there. Hello, Nick Frost did an excellent job.
Absolutely, I'm glad, not dead. I think that was the big one of the big things from last week's episode. Head cut off, but, uh, KB was able to fix him up, it looks like, and, SM-33 still lives to tell the tale.
Exactly.
Well, I think, you raised some really wonderful points here, and I think for me, the reveal of the supervisor, I think you and I both kind of went down that same path. It sounds like with like them not showing Tack Rented was like the almost the like the tipping of the card, and so to speak, to be like, oh well, okay, we didn't see a face. They must have cast a major actor. They didn't, like, there's a reason they didn't show this to us at this point in time. But just a red herring, ultimately, that led me to think that, okay, maybe my theory was right. Oh, okay, well, I'm onto something here, and then, falsely speculating, or
Meanwhile, regular
speculating
folks are
incorrectly.
like,
Yeah,
it's all fine to me.
yeah, they don't care.
They don't care.
They lived there. They woke up the next morning and was like, that was a good show.
Live the rest of the yeah. They just went on with their regular lives, and we're all like, what does it mean?
What a peaceful existence that would be, you know.
Oh, it just
Well,
yes, it's very tranquil. A tranquil life a civilian has, a Star Wars
Meanwhile,
fan.
I'm like, oh, he mentioned that the references the speech that Palpatine makes in Revenge of the Sith, so therefore we're looking at like at least 39 years roughly from Revenge of the Sith to this point. Okay, we got a kind of timeline here, so like it's only really 1-2 generations removed of contact with the Republic. Like we're not talking like High Republic was when they lost contact with this group, or someone was contacting them. They at least got one message through. So I'm like, okay, was the supervisor protecting them from the Empire and intently hiding them? I don't know. Does the supervisor have this altruistic ethic system that was
It'll be
protecting everybody? I don't know.
it'll be an easy it'll be an easy Lego build. If
It
you want to
will.
make the supervisor, it's pretty easy. It's a bowl with a red Lego piece. Secondly, how easy now is it for Hasbro to do a Black Series Captain Rennet because he can look like anybody?
That's right.
You throw anything out there and you're like, tell me what he looks like.
And he can be headless too.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Just a hologram.
Already with this little gash like in the middle where you can just kind of put it through, like, hey, you can see the other side.
That's right.
Um, you can
That's
stick
right.
stick him up like something on your cork board, and like, oh my gosh,
Tack Rented
where are
with the
the
friends we
Etsy
made along the
Rennets right
way.
now?
Create your own Rented. Really, create your own
There's a
adventure.
$1 million Etsy idea
There are
right
some
there.
great ideas coming along here. I hope people are listening and taking notes, because feel free to exploit our our ideas here. The other thing that I thought of when I was like, oh, it's just a droid, um, was Greg, did you happen to watch the Marvel show She-Hulk on Disney Plus?
Yes.
Reminded me of that finale too, where Kevin was
Oh
the
yeah.
droid revealed as the altruistic supervisor kind of the MCU, but now the supervisor of Ad was also a big, large, omnipotent droid that was running everything, and apparently when he goes out, everything goes out. The whole system AT-AT doesn't function if the supervisor isn't up and running, I guess. And
At the risk of getting the ire, from Marvel fans, that was a different ending. I'm just gonna
it
say
sure
it
was.
was interesting how they ended that, which was a great show up to that point. But I'm just gonna say, yep, you did it, and there you go. And I can't wait to see her in more stuff. Great character.
I agree.
Interesting ending.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Oh, it's one that's like, oh, all right, cool,
All right.
interesting.
All right.
Um,
I didn't see that coming.
of all the things I expected, this was not it.
This was not it.
Speaking of unexpected endings, um, so without recapping the entire episode, because that's not the point of this discussion here. But the skeleton crew, through their combined efforts, is able to thwart Jod in a way. They contact Kim and bring the New Republic to AT-AT, and they destroy the barrier. X-wings, B-wings, a C-90 Corvette comes to AT-AT, and they kind of defeat the pirates in grand fashion. So amidst this whole sequence, we're talking about 20 minutes worth of action nonstop, tension, etc. What moments stood out to you the most, Greg?
B wing.
B wing. Just one moment. B wings in action.
Especially for those who are Rebels fans who saw, Hera and the origin of the
Yeah,
B wing, to see, and we, of course, we saw B wings in Return of the Jedi, but we did not see them. We saw them sort of like, retract and go, but we did not see what they were capable of, and that
yeah.
was sort of the fun that the Rebels show had. But to see them kind of go off and like, this is perfectly deployed because they're
Yeah.
heavily armed, and that's perfect for the type of vessel they're going after.
Hmm.
And I'm like, as soon as I saw that, and I enjoyed it the second time because then I saw all the points when they're doing that, like that huge burst, and it's really taken out the ship. It was perfect. I mean, yeah, I enjoyed that. And then I think the second time I thought I saw the Corvette the first time a little bit, but it was the second time because I was kind of following along, and I love Wim, just like they're like Wim, and he's just looking at those things. I'm
Yeah.
going, now that there's some great seeds, and I'd really like to see what, I'd be very interested in Wim's career after this, to evoke Palpatine. We'll be very interested in your career. Um, but that was great, and also the awe that, like, if any of us saw, X wings, B wings, all those things in live action, I'd be doing the same thing that Wim was, just looking and going, "This is so freaking cool." But anyway, but yeah, the B wings were fun, especially for those who Return of the Jedi is their, like
Yeah.
their favorite
Yeah.
film. That was the first one they saw in, and to see them kind of go at it and kind of get their moment was awesome.
Well, it's nice knowing too that there's a chance that these are the same B wings that Hera helped
Ooh.
to snag. Basically, like I
Yeah,
think that
because they
that's
can be around for a
a
while.
wonderful connection. I think Pablo confirmed that, though Pablo Hidalgo, when I say Pablo, from the Lucasfilm Story Group, confirmed when Rebels was coming out that those were the B wings used in Return of the Jedi. So
Oh, that's cool.
it's thereby possible entirely that those are the same B wings that were used in Return of the Jedi and therefore used in Star Wars Rebels, which I think would be a great connection. Hey, Filoni's hands are tied to everything, so why not? And I think it's just awesome to see X-wings always in action. I think always puts a smile on my face to see them come, and finally
And a
for the
lot
kids
of
to,
them.
and a lot too, and no pilots that, for to my knowledge, that we'd seen before to this. It's fun seeing Carson Teva. It's fun seeing Trapper Wolf and all the actors appearing and all that stuff. Not just the actors, but directors appearing
Mhm.
as X-wing pilots. But it's also nice to see that it's a large Republic fleet, and it's not the same people constantly being asked to show up for every occasion and call that is needed.
Now, will I enjoy seeing one of those actors used at a convention down the road, charging 75 to $80 for their autograph? Not really. However,
With
hey,
one picture of them from the still that was used.
now, am I telling you not to go make a living because you could ride that one for a while?
That's right.
Go for it.
30, 40 years of conventions. Yep, it's
Will I be
possible.
excited to pay that kind of money for it? No, but hey, um, I think it was probably a big thrill, not only for those folks to get that, but I mean to have the creators of Skeleton Crew get to use the X wings, and it wasn't just one or two. When you
Yeah.
have like a
Oh
whole,
my
like,
gosh.
group, um, that something like out of the was it the Rebel? What was the Oh, I'm not the Legends guy, so I don't know what is it, the groups or the X-wing, was it squadron? Thank you.
What, Rogue
Squadron,
Squad?
what I'm
Oh,
look
yeah.
yeah. Seeing a whole squadron, that would be what I would consider probably a
Mhm,
squadron, and to
mhm.
see a squadron again, that's pretty cool.
Well, I think it's a valid point that you bring up here too, that I think expands to all of Skeleton Crew. So looking at it as a whole now that we have kind of the whole picture of it, is that I didn't find myself in any part of this series being like, oh, there were limitations of the volume in this sequence.
Mhm.
I think that's probably the biggest complaint about Obi-Wan Kenobi is that some scenes felt small and condensed because
Right.
of the volume and COVID protocols and just that type of stuff. Totally get it. That's kind of the way the business works. Use your headcanon to misremember that there are 1,000 stormtroopers there and you're good to go. Um, but in this sequence, like especially this ending sequence where I'm like, wow, I don't know where it starts and where it ends. Like I'm seeing Wim look up into the sky and there's about 50, 60 X-wings coming down and many other ships of different types. And at no point was I like, okay, here's where reality ends, here's where it starts. These are created set pieces that are meant to complement the structure. I so kudos to ILM for figuring out how to trick our brains once more when it comes to this stuff.
Exactly. I think there was only maybe a few times in the series that I kinda was like, "Oh, that probably looks like the volume." But even then, it's like it's easy, especially when you're brought up watching, reruns of Doctor Who and how
Yeah.
poor
Yeah,
those
some of those
special
early
effects
Star Trek
were.
episodes too will really get you.
Exactly, but you go, "You know what? They have done so much, and it's only getting better." And yeah, even with Kenobi, it's like you go back. I enjoy rewatching Kenobi, and you go, "Yeah, I can see a couple things where you go, but it doesn't affect my overall enjoyment of the series."
That's
And in
right.
this case, I'm like, if you're giving them tools to make shows like this, go for it. I'd rather have these than not have them.
Yeah, I agree. And if that's your one complaint, then you have nothing to complain about,
Hmm.
in my opinion. If that's really going to drag your enjoyment of the series down, is a few less stormtroopers than you were expecting, and I didn't think you were meant to enjoy the show to begin with.
No, no.
So for me, I would say some moments that stood out was Neil running to like the first thing he wanted to do was go to his bubble bath as soon as he
As
got
one
home,
does,
he was like,
as one does.
I gotta do my bath. I gotta do some self care. This was a lot. I
Self
enjoyed
care.
my adventure, but I need to take care of myself. I can't hang out with my family. They're going to be asking me 1,000 questions. I just need to have some me time. Totally respect that. Good job, guys. Good job, Neil.
I
Um,
just wanna say I hope as a culture that's their thing.
I
I'm
hope so
like, "You know
too.
what?
Yeah,
We
everyone's
don't
taking a bubble
know.
bath.
That just might be a cornerstone. It might be there might be more significance."
Maybe.
But yeah, it's one of those like, yes, after a good adventure, I need a soak.
That's right. We all have long days, and some people are like, I need a bubble bath afterwards. And Neil certainly is that kind of guy. So good to see that kind of representation in a galaxy far, far away for folks.
Hashtag
Um,
Team Neil.
yeah, Neil Nation, Neil
Neil
Nation.
Nation.
Um, I will say the other thing that I loved seeing in this, and it's just a longer thing, was so much of this show was based off of the relationship between Wim and his father Wendell, and seeing Wendell become that kid again Wim embodies so much, to have that, see him and his son have this experience together where they're going on these speeder bikes, doing the leap over that canyon, basically surviving, and him go, well, that was a lot of fun. Like just finding we saw him in the cubicles, the soul being taken away from him, basically doing the 9 to 5 job, working as a level 7 con- contact supervisor. I can't remember exactly what the exact title he said was, but one of the funniest moments, I will say, of Skeleton Crew was the true joy he had on his face when Wim was like, can you find a way to turn
I'm a level
back
7
on?" He's like,
supervisor, and you're
"Wim,
like,
I'm a level 7 supervisor. You bet I can." It's like, for all the level 7 supervisors within all of us, basically anybody that works a 9 to 5, we're like,
"Mhm."
yes, our random skill sets paid off. Loved it. I was fist bumping in the air, and I'm like, finally, Wendell, you found your purpose in life, being a dad and also being a level 7 supervisor.
And I did like, when Wim had his hand on the thing, the controls for the barrier, and Wendell kinda acquiesced, because on one hand, you're going like, you could see Wendell going, "No, no, just do it. Don't worry about me." But I
Yeah.
like the fact that he didn't, and he was like, "Just do as he says."
Yeah, he
And
didn't
I like that.
sacrifice his dad.
No, and also that I think there was, you saw some growth with Wendell, but you also saw a lot of realism as well.
Yeah.
I missed the first time I missed. I'm like, I didn't see how he got the bike, and
Ah,
then the second time I saw him, like, that is super funny. It's sort of like kicking the other kid off the
kicked
bike.
him off. He said, "This
Uh,
is mine now."
that's awesome. So I do like how, even though we didn't get to see Fern, go back and race and win or whatever like that, you did see that kid, the punk kid, get his comeuppance, as it were,
Yeah, yeah,
thanks
it's
to
a great
Wendell.
tie back to the first episode. Good stuff, crew, skeleton crew.
Crew.
So a lot of great stuff and a lot of great action in this episode too, and it showcased the journey that everybody had in this series. Right, you see Fern's courage and bravery as a leader and creating a plan, or just kind of just facing fear in front of her. You have KB. Uh, being sure of herself and taking the initiative and not being afraid. You have Neil shooting weapons and learning. He's like, they had this on that other planet. This is where the gun should be. So this is where I can shoot and take out some of these pirate ships here and to create a distraction. And of course, then Wim create having this adventure with his dad and solving that in a way, I guess, hopefully solving that rift that was between them and being able to understand each other a bit better as the series went on. So I think that was all excellent. But now that we have kind of seen all of Skeleton Crew that we've been told we're getting at this point, Greg, do you think that this episode did a good job of concluding the Skeleton Crew story?
I think they did a good job within the context of being a Skeleton Crew ending.
Mm-hmm.
I There was a lot that they left out there for
Yeah,
us to kind of go like, okay, your whole way of life is destroyed. Everybody now knows you better have
yeah. The
another
barrier is
squadron.
open. No, there's
The
no
barrier's open and
protection.
all this. There's a lot, but the Skeleton Crew series did not need to answer any of those questions.
Yeah.
I think they, like I said, I kind of got in there, and I think once I got to a certain point, I kind of felt like, oh, I know how this is going to go, and I don't know whether I was. I think at some point you enjoy the mystery ride until they solve the mystery. Then there's always a little bit of deflation, like, oh, okay, this is how it's going to go. But for me, it
Mm-hmm.
didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, okay, but it didn't take away from my enjoyment of it. I think they did a good job of bringing it to a close. We wanted to see, the X-Wings come in and kind of save the day, because after I'm like, okay, 4 kids really can't take out a whole bunch of pirates, unless Jod has a real twist of heart. But even then, that might have been because of the length of the show.
Mm-hmm.
He's moving slowly, but I think it would have taken maybe a little bit out of he ends up sacrificing himself, which I thought he might do at some point. Whether if either the supervisor turned to be, kind of got really dark, and then he kind of sacrifices himself, but the pirates never got in within the barrier. So, but I think that it stayed true to the characters, leaving a little bit open. No one really, no one really died. You didn't really see any pirates get
No,
killed either.
no.
Although certainly with that ship
I
crashing,
gotta
there
imagine.
were victims. There were victims.
I gotta
Don't get me
imagine.
wrong.
Yeah, Jaleel White character probably didn't make it.
Yeah, probably not. Well, no, it's funny. Kind of the ship doesn't blow up. It is kind of funny that
True.
he's
He
left.
survived
He's left holding
acid
the bag.
too, so who knows?
But no, I think they did a good job of ending the Skeleton Crew story in a way that didn't necessarily have to get, it didn't have to. It's like you made a great meal and you didn't have to clean up the dishes.
Yeah,
Everybody kind
yeah.
of wins. Somebody else gets to do that. But in that mess is some things that you could use, maybe you can use for a season two, or
Mhm.
like I said, there's enough there that it kind of becomes its own little like cliffhanger. And
Yeah. Well,
even
yeah.
with that mess, you could see it referred to back in stories down the road, where maybe that this is a crisis that for the New Republic, because now they're flush with this
Yeah.
kind of cash, and now they have to deal with it. And of course, we've already seen that they're not the most efficient crew. I know a friend of mine was like, no, they couldn't have got there that fast. That's too efficient. You're going, it's a valid point, but as long as the court, like, now when I go back and you see, KB giving Kim the coordinates, and yeah, it doesn't take much, and they're already, like, they're already after
Yeah, they might have
they're
been already
already
chasing down the pirates.
yeah, and so hyperspace goes pretty fast, and if those guys were like, yeah, I can kind of see that, because if you know where you're going, then it doesn't take too long, at any rate. But
Yeah.
I think it was a good ending. What about you?
Yeah, I think that you're kind of swaying me here a little bit here on this because at first I think I was like, it just cut to black, and I was like, that's it. They're not gonna answer maybe one or two of the lingering questions. Um, Especially not ever since we live in this world that is post the acolyte, where I'm like, this show definitely was intending to have multiple seasons,
Hmm.
and then knowing now that it's canceled, and I'm like, will I ever get those answers in any way that I want or am going to be satisfied with seeing or reading in some way? I'm like, I don't know. It's a big question cloud out there, and I'm like, just be patient, Anthony. They'll probably get to it within the next 20 to 30 years. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of life that can happen in that point. So again, I want the answer sooner than later. Um,
I'd rather not be about 80 or so
yeah,
before they figure
exactly
that out.
right.
I'm going on record saying another 20 or 30 for me is a little
So
different than you. I'd rather they
yeah.
didn't. If at all, I just as soon get that answer sooner.
Yeah, I think we'll all just take it a little bit sooner than later. So, but in a way, like the Mandalorian season 3 had a really like cherry on top ending where it just kind of just ended with a nice bow and didn't really like beg for a season 4 at all. And obviously they're making the Mandalorian and Grogu movie afterwards, but it's like, okay, that story seemingly could just end right there, and I'm okay with it. If it didn't conclude any further, like great, they stop Moff Gideon, Mandalore is saved. They can go back and create anew again, and that's a pretty good. I'm happy with that. But obviously, they're going to continue on and do other stories with it. I like what you're saying. That well, first, let me just add to the point before I get into that next thing I'm going to say here, which is you are right in that it is a good ending for the skeleton crew, the crew itself. These kids. It's not the skeleton crew. The show was never titled Skeleton Crew, and its wider implications for the galaxy at large.
That's not water they have to
that's
carry.
that's not a burden that the show needed to have. It's not a show that was required to answer all these questions. Of course, the questions come up naturally because of the why of it existing, and we got that in some way. We learned a little bit more about the galaxy lore itself because of the show. And as people that are knee deep within the canon of it all, books, comics, extended media, it's natural for us to ask these types of questions to be like, okay, how does it fit into this larger structure? Um, and I think that this finale brings up a ton of questions that aren't answered. Where's Jod? What's the deal with the pirates? What's the money? Now that they have the barrier's gone. Who's gonna right? Is Thrawn right around the corner? Gonna just jump in here? We know when the last communication was technically with the Republic and the Jedi and all that stuff, but like, was there any who knew about it? Did the Empire know about it? What was happening here? That's a whole rigmarole of questions that again would be a they don't need to break the fourth wall, tell all the audience all this stuff, and then say, "Great, the back to your regularly scheduled skeleton crew as we conclude this up here." No, and much like the '80s adventures that it was inspired by, those just kind of end abruptly too. You don't really have like these grand resolutions that are like wonderful. Have a great day. Close the story up, right? um, it's like Raiders, right? The ending is of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just they show the Ark being put into a warehouse, a bunch of other treasures and seemingly other things that we now know as Area 51. Um, just crazy. Begs for many questions, but also just concludes right there. So I'm like, I love it and I hate it at the same time. um, so that's where I kind of land on this, and I like that you were like, this could be a springboard for another story down the line. This could, I'm thinking in my head, Ahsoka season 2, because obviously there's going to be a component that is the Ezra Hera storyline that is taking place. This could be a great avenue of like, great, there's a bunch of money now available for the world. You need to fund your republic. You need to fund somehow this new empire is going to try and be funded somehow, some way. Um, I imagine that end could be a major source of conflict moving forward in terms of the resources and things that need to be available for a functioning government or rebellion or resistance empire to happen.
Let me add this, and this was part of what I started doing for my Fantha review for this. It's interesting, like, part of me is happy that the story resolved the way it is, and part of me could be also be very happy if that was it.
Yeah.
Not that I don't wanna see their stories continue and these amazing actors, who just did like a Herculean job
Sure.
of taking this, but I also think, back a few years ago, now Ted Lasso came out at an extraordinary time and was an enormous hit, and what a great feel-good story from beginning to end, season 1. Has had several other seasons, but I can say that I started to kind of lose a little bit
Mhm.
into the
Mhm.
2nd season, because at some point you go, "I really don't want these people to be." I like the happy ending that Mando got,
Yeah.
like you're talking about with Mando season 3, I'm like, they're sitting there just watching
They're on a
Grogu
front
play in a
porch.
yard,
Yep. They got a house.
and
They're happy.
exactly, and I feel that, like, how are they taking away, how could you take this and do something else with it? You can see some of the other, if you think about like a Back to the Future 2 and 3
Mm.
and some of these where it's like there was clearly a demand to see those and there was the financial wherewithal going like the stuff is making movie, making money hand over fist. But how do you tell it that
Yeah.
satisfy because are you
How
gonna
do you
have to
top
put
the
them?
first one if you can?
How do you top it? You're gonna put them back into harm's way. How do you do it that would tell a story, tell a unique story, but not just retread it, because otherwise then it's like then you put yourself out there to go then it becomes this law of diminishing returns. Like Westworld would be another great
Mm.
example of an awesome first season, and as second and a third one you kind of go, but it also had a lot of mystery in all this, and so some of this I could be very happy to see just the one and done, but
Mhm.
the other,
Mhm.
like, I wanna see these characters go forward. I'd like to see more adventures. I would like to see someone solve this and figure out
Yeah.
how you could get them in a second series that maybe it's a through line throughout the whole one, and it resolves at the end, like another type adventure that doesn't necessarily have to give me, like, it's funny, I think of Ahsoka and how we were so happy just to see live action, Hera, Sabine, Chopper, and all that.
Yeah.
What are our expectations? Let's take a couple shows down the road. What are our expectations on Ahsoka season 2 with those characters that we go?
Mhm.
We were just dang
Yeah,
happy to
yeah,
see
we
them
were
begin with.
dazzled by the spectacle.
Now what? Now now you're thinking of like
You ripped the
you're looking
Band-Aid
at.
off, now you gotta
Mhm. And now
give us
you're
some
looking at
more.
show. You're looking at show length. You're going like, all right, we've have somebody that replaced Ray Stevens, and God rest his soul.
Mhm.
So we're gonna get more Bale and Skull. Like, okay, now we have, now we're gonna let our tinfoil go nuts, and we're gonna have expectations
Yeah.
for everyone. It's gonna be a tougher one, and they didn't necessarily escape the criticism
Sure.
unscathed.
Yeah.
They didn't fare as badly as the Acolyte did, but you know, I think this show also goes on record saying like Skeleton Crew pulled off what some of these other shows could not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Disney Plus and everybody there and Lucasfilm has to go, what made this show work? And how did, it really seemed to bring a lot of, you know, critics and, the beards and bots and all that they really, they took the show well.
The
How
red
did we
laser
do it?
eyes were minimal in this.
Exactly. But, they're still gonna be out there because there's a good business in being a
Yeah,
contrarian,
absolutely.
and you guys get a lot more downloads and clicks than I do, so who am I to complain? But I would say, let's talk in the days, weeks, and months ahead and have more shows on this going, "What
Yeah.
worked?"
Yeah.
Those are some shows I'm excited to have a conversation about.
Well, let's start that conversation a bit here, and that's my final question for you, Greg. So, what do you think is the legacy of Skeleton? Like, what kind of legacy will the show have amidst the grander Star Wars Lucasfilm plethora of content that has been created?
I think it was a sleeper show that, as we talked about before, of all the stuff that was announced at the
Mhm.
celebration, that was the one I was least
Yeah.
interested in, but it became probably one of the best shows that they did. I mean, a lot of even like I said, we talked the aforementioned beards and bots. We'll go back to Mandalorian season 1.
Mhm.
They'll grudgingly give you, well, I like Mando season 1 and 2, but the other,
Yep.
but I
Eventually, they'll
would
turn on it.
eventually they'll turn on it. But I would say that it was a success because I think and the Acolyte early on did this where, like, it knew it was a TV show, it felt like a TV show, I was okay
Mhm.
that it wasn't this big grand movie,
Yeah.
and I like the
Didn't
fact
need to
that
be
it
that way. Yeah.
the pacing, the writing, everything was good. It came along at, it came along at Christmas time, so it was kind of a feel good. Everybody was in a good mood.
Yeah.
But, I think it just did what it did very well. And I think it showed, especially after Acolyte. Like I said, I think Acolyte was unfairly, unfairly hit. Now there was certainly issues with it, and it came at a different time. It was initiated at a different time,
Hmm.
birthed at a much different time, and it does show that there are expectations that fans have, and I don't think Lucasfilm and Disney Plus want to be in the business of alienating fans one way or the other. That's just not good business sense.
Yeah.
You need to make stuff that people get. The happier you make the fans, even if you're retreading stuff, the more that they'll watch, the more they'll enjoy, and the more that they'll keep
Hmm.
subscribing to it.
Hmm.
So you could see them playing it safe, and you could call this in certain ways it was safe. But I'm
Yeah.
like, we got Jude Law, and that was a big get. I'm a huge fan, and it was just good. It was fun. It was good. It gave a lot of the spirit of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And, anybody would tell you, a corporation would just say, make more of that. But at the same time, let's, you could see Mando season 3 versus Mando season 1. You know, Still same Mando, still love him. But, you can see where there
Yeah.
was difficulty, and there was probably the way it was constructed was because some things didn't work out. But,
Absolutely.
less is more if you want to take some time between shows, but make a good one. And hopefully you have enough data, and you guys know what you're doing. Make some good stuff. You don't have to flood us with it. But this was a hit. I mean, numbers aside, I think it was a big hit. And it keeps me subscribed, keeps me wanting to come back
Yep.
for more.
Keeps you talking, keeps you
Hmm.
going on the socials and creating that conversation that they love too.
Keeps bringing Greg back on the program
It sure does.
with me. So there we go.
Another breakfast pack is coming your way, folks. I
Really
think,
soon.
yeah, I think this show, in hindsight, do you think that because you weren't like anticipating the show so much that you didn't have so many like maybe unfair or fair expectations put on it before you even saw a single episode?
That's interesting. Of course, we have Andor season 2 coming up, and
Mhm.
Andor was, a triumph. But we also knew that there were, the writing crew for that, the Gilroys
Yep.
were head
They've
and
been in
shoulders.
on it,
And
yeah,
so,
and it's been a show that was in the works for like 4 years up to that point too, so
exactly.
they put the time in it.
And we also know that there's a lot of money going into Andor season 2. I think at the end of Andor season 2, we're going to be like, man, I wish it would have, instead of crunching all this into one season, that they could have had multiple seasons.
The
However,
original 5 season
oh
plan.
my gosh. But it's tricky. And so, but they'll also be coming in, now
With
go back and
major
watch the beginning
expectations,
of,
yeah,
yeah, go back and watch the beginning of Andor season 1, and how it's just very different. But
it's
what I
vastly
would
different, yeah.
Yeah, but it's also going to be for a more adult audience. You're not
Mhm.
going to have the vast, families of people that are sitting around watching Skeleton Crew. This is going to be for the fans who are wanting some real meaty Star Wars, and that's one we'll be looking at. Definitely looking at run times and all this, because we know what we're getting,
Yeah.
but we don't kind of know what we're getting. And so I have expectations for it, but I'm not as worried about it because I know that it's going to be solid. And Diego Luna is just going to have, I mean, it's going to be great to see all those characters back. And I think that probably for more of a victory lap season than
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope so too. I can't wait. April's, just around the corner. It's the next Star Wars
Mhm.
property that's coming out. Celebration will be at the same time. So it'll be a busy era for us Star Wars podcasters, to tell you that. I will say too, just to kind of wrap up the legacy conversation, I think you said the words that I was thinking, where this show was safe, and I think we can chat about that for a second here. But I think that like it was a nice palate cleanser for us that enjoyed the Acolyte. Like we didn't have to like worry about saying like, boy, I like the Skeleton Crew show this week, and didn't have to worry about 1,500 people replying to our Instagram post or the Blue Sky or Threads or X, wherever you're posting that, and getting all the negative, like, "How dare you like that? You're not a Star Wars fan." That got exhausting to a certain point. So it was nice to have that kind of palate cleanser in some way, to have this refreshing take on Star Wars in some way. But for the other folks that are like, "Oh my God, Kiadi Mundi said something," uh, it ruins everything. The lore is ruined. Like, this show was safe in that it didn't necessarily push the boundaries and like showcase that the supervisor was a clone of Palpatine, and what it didn't do anything outlandish or take a big swing like that. Like Takrinid wasn't, um, you know, Jabba's son, again, a character that will maybe appear in the near future. The Jude Law didn't turn out to be the kid from Revenge of the Sith that says, "Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do?" And to show the case that Anakin saved one kid from the Jedi Temple, which would uproar in the internet. I can imagine it already. So like, it was safe in terms of that, and it didn't answer some of these bigger questions that were asked, like we posed here at the end of this, about like, what does it mean for all this? And again, didn't need to, but if it maybe had ventured into, dipped its toes into a bit more of those, it would have received a bit more ire from that community that is like, well, anything new is ruining my Star Wars.
And it's nice that we're going to finish up, like I'm assuming, and I would say you would be in agreement that we will probably hear about new live action series at Celebration in
Let's hope.
Japan.
Yeah,
But until then, we have
because
Andor
there's nothing
season
after
2,
Andor, as far as I understand. As well,
and
Ahsoka
that
season 2, but yeah,
right, but that could come a whiles
that'll be
a
years from
while,
now, I imagine. Yeah,
right? And if there would be any additional skeleton crew, it'd be a little while longer. But that's not necessarily a bad thing because it was filmed a long time ago.
yeah.
The kids are obviously
Got to
older
age those
now,
kids up. Yep.
and that may work in your favor. It's like there's a lot of great. We've had a lot of great young Star Wars talent out there, and they'd be a fool not to realize that some of these folks, yeah, it's let them grow. Let's not make some of the same mistakes. You don't have to work them to death. It's not like a sweatshop, but there are enough characters that you can bring back to go, like we would go, yep, they were in this, and now that they're a little older and there's more stories out there, and maybe that is part of the future. You'd have to think,
Yeah.
that a corporation that bought it, they didn't buy it just to make a couple of films and be done.
Right.
They need to
Right.
keep making Star Wars,
Got to get
to
that
keep
return on
making them.
investment. Yep.
Exactly. So we got to keep Bob Iger in houses.
We got print
So
money. Print the
yeah.
money. This is the Star Wars is the Atten of the Disney company.
Yeah, you know who else has 1,139 vaults? Disney.
Yep.
I guarantee you they've got vaults of money just like everything
Well,
else underneath
underneath the
those vaults.
Magic Kingdom is
That's where you go if you wash out working in in the whatever the town. What's the square when you first go in? What's the like Main Street, USA?
oh yeah, it's Main Street. I don't know if they have a I'm sure they do, but the Disney
If
adults
you're a cast
can
member and
find
you
us.
wash
Yeah.
out, you go work in the mines under Disney to make a print the money.
Hey,
Anyway,
the vaults are down there. The vaults are down
vaults
there,
are down there.
folks.
It's there.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on to chat about Skeleton Crew. We'll let you go a little early. We almost hit
Thank
the
you.
2 hour mark, but we'll save the conversation for
I don't
another
have another
time.
hour or two to talk Phantom Menace with you,
Yeah, that's right.
like Greg does.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
he's up.
This is when we should have called Greg in and then seen if he could leave and then see if he comes back and we're still chatting about the episode. Oh man, go check out that episode, folks, if you really want to hear a fun discussion with the two Gregs. But anywho, Greg McLaughlin, host of the Rebel Base Card. Where can the folks find you online? The Rebel Base Card podcast, the Breakfast Pack, all that stuff. Where can they find you online?
You're doing such a good job. I should just let you keep going. I'm like, I should just give you the bylines.
Steam
Um,
into Star Wars was recently an episode.
See, it's perfect. It was fun, and yeah, we just got back from Steam into Star Wars last weekend. Tom Gross, Dan Zare, Dan Ream, and all the folks at Washington Community High School put on another great event, and it was fun to be down there. John Alois of the Hyperion Hub podcast. Speaking of Disney, we got to not only do our shows down there, but interview a lot of folks that episode I put out just whenever you're hearing this, I just put it out. And so it was really fun. And
Mhm.
so on X or Threads, Blue Sky, Hive, yes, I still post there.
Hey,
Um, Facebook, you can find me at Rebel Base Card, or you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or pretty much wherever you're going to get your podcast. They keep adding ways that I can get out there, and it's
True.
really fun. You can find some of my writing on the Skeleton Crew on Fantha Tracks, as I am, like I said, nearly done with my review there. And I think Mark liked me so much he might bring me back for
Ah,
Andor.
nice.
So that'll be fun to kind of flex. And it seems like each week I can get faster and faster at this writing stuff, which I used to do a lot more of, thanks to all the tools that I get to use, and writing on my phone, when it's dark and I'm sitting there like clack 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 clack.
Yeah. Yeah.
The main thing is the takeaway is like get those thoughts out because you'll forget them.
That's right. That's right. Write down the notes, folks. Write down the
Exactly.
notes. It's easier to comprehend to pull from it later than to rely on your memory.
Exactly. But thank you for having me on. This was it was a treat to talk Skeleton Crew. It'll be fun to talk to Greg on the breakfast pack about it. And I'm sure we will have some follow-up shows that we might have to bring you on, because there's a lot to talk about, and
Yeah.
it's kind of fun, and it also be fun to hear all the other podcasts out there, like Coffee with Kenobi and
Hmm.
Star Wars reactions, and of course Long Take will probably Jen will probably be doing a review of Skeleton Crew to get, but and Colby and all that. So I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say about this, and I'm also excited to get my stuff done so I can
Enjoy
listen and
everyone else's. Yeah.
enjoy everyone else's. Exactly.
And you buried the lead. They got this Hudson Hawk podcast coming out soon, so we got to get on
Telling you.
that.
That's a great summer thing. Let's get everybody back on for some Goonies talk, maybe some ET talk. And yes, I'm ready to bring the
Hawk
Hawk
Talk.
back.
Yeah,
Hawk talk.
if only the Hawk Tua podcast had already taken the dang good
I'm,
title
I'm
for.
going to I'm going to
Yeah.
get that domain right now.
Oh, all right. Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on. Folks, for listening, thank you for joining us on the Skeleton Crew Pirate Like Adventure. It's been a blast chatting each and every week with you all, and geeking out about all things that have taken place in the Skeleton Crew show and how it has affected the Star Wars community. It's been a true pleasure to bring it to you each and every week again. And we'll be back next week with something in the Star Wars Lucasfilm adjacent galaxy. Who knows what we'll get into? It's that weird era where we're in between things. So we have to pull from the whiteboard and see what's next. So be on the lookout for that, folks. And we'll be back to your podcast feed sooner than you think. All right. Until then, may the force be with you. Take care.